people are afraid to be angry, but look how angry white people get. Look how angry white people get when 911 happened. These Americans were like, we're gonna kill the entire world for revenge. The US needs this area, which is why I think this base military, the fact that Kenya is sitting there, they're using Kenya as a way to actually make sure that we have a permanent military base in Haiti, because they need that. They don't even consider Haiti alongside the Cuban Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, the Russian Revolution. And so what's fascinating about it is the one revolution where complete freedom and removes slavery, but also cancel the power of the most powerful army in the world. There are two sayings from people that I think I want to start with. The first one is Frederick Douglass, African-American, former enslaved African and abolitionist in the 1800s, who was also, the US sent him to be like an ambassador to Haiti in the 1800s because they've been trying to get this piece of land from Haiti since the 1800s called Mole Saint Nicolas. I think they want to set up a military base. And Frederick Douglass said that Haiti is Black and we have not yet forgiven Haiti for being Black. And so I think that's a very important way to begin this, but also it's to think about Michelle Rolfe-Trouillot, who's a Haitian American scholar, who published back in the early 80s, late 80s, and in this article about Haiti, the exceptionalizing of Haiti, is that Haiti is the longest neocolonial experiment in the modern world. And so and then to bring it together with Gerald Horne, Dr. Gerald Horne, who always talks about counter-revolution, Haiti has been suffering a counter-revolution for its independence. Haiti as the first and only successful revolt of enslaved Africans in the modern world, 1804, whose revolution comes around the age of revolutions, even when they don't count it, the revolution that they call the French Revolution, what they call the American Revolution, which was really a revolution to continue fascism. It's not really a revolution. And then they don't even consider Haiti alongside the Cuban Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, the Russian Revolution. And so what's fascinating about it is the one revolution where complete freedom and removes slavery, but also cancel the power of the most powerful army in the world. And I think for that reason, these enslaved Africans were able to, the fact that they dared rise up, but also defeat. It wasn't just the French, it wasn't just Napoleon's army. The British tried to come in and take over the land because Haiti was the most lucrative of the colonies at the time. The Spanish tried to come over, the US tried to come over. And all this time, these enslaved Africans who basically had nothing, but were able to kill and all these French soldiers, diminish all of these European powers who were the most powerful in the world. And the fact that they did that bred a resentment among the white Western world that has never changed. And so that's an important thing to think about when we're thinking about why Haiti is the way it is. One of the things that people refuse to do is acknowledge that white supremacy is global. It impacts every single institution of the world. And so when you think about the international community, you're not thinking about the international community. You're thinking of the US, France, Canada, the European Union, the white settler states, or what Gerald Horne calls, the Europeans in their, he calls it something about their, calls them, I'll remember the word, but he calls them like their evil spawn, the European in the New World. And if you think about the structures of the world, if you think about the United Nations, you think about the United Nations as the most undemocratic institution international, where you have five members of the UN Security Council that make all the decisions, and no other decision is binding, where the US controls the decision making in the UN Security Council. You think about the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, anything that came about in 1945 after the Second European War that they called World War II. It's anything that emerges out of that emerges through white supremacy, in order to maintain and control European supremacy over the world. Because remember, 1945, where most of these things were established, they were still colonies, right? Most of the world was still colonized by the European countries. So the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, the ICC, IMF, I said IMF already, anything the UN, the UNESCO, the development apparatus, all of it is maintaining the control of Europeans and white people, racialized as white people, over the world. Understanding that global white supremacy is a thing and structures everything from credit ratings of countries to who gets access to loans to which, the media, who controls the media. Then we don't understand how it is that it's so simple to take the sovereignty of a country like Haiti and run roughshod over the sovereignty and get away with it and get the whole world to get away with it, right? And so when you talk about the internet, when I'm around and people talk about Haiti and I see the media manufacturing consent about Haiti as like the biggest problem for world peace, this tiny little island with 12 million people, all the way where it is in the Caribbean, as a threat to world peace, but then you can get the United Nations to sign off on a military invasion of this country while you have a live stream side on this side of the world where bombs are dropping in the head, but then Haiti is a threat to international community and Haiti is the one. And so to understand that is to understand how Haiti is seen. And part of that has to be is a long history of representation. First of all, it's race, and we cannot not deal with race, white supremacy, and anti-Blackness. But we also have to understand that the only reason people believe everything they read about Haiti is because they believe things about Black people. So when you say there's cannibalism in Haiti, people are like, of course there's cannibalism, because that's what Black people do. When you say, oh, there's corruption, because corruption only Black people can do. We know this about the African continent. You have the most corrupt, the biggest gangsters in the world are the US and its international community, but we never call them gangsters. The biggest, corrupt people are the billionaires, the Bill Gates and all these people, the Elon Musk, but we don't call them corrupt. But people, believe it was about Africans. And so we have to understand that. And I think that's part of the reason why for people to believe everything about Haiti, including from Black people believe everything they hear about Haiti. And we have to also understand the media is structured, it's run through Europe. I remember back in the 90s, when I first started traveling to the African continent, there was local content in the newspapers. So, you had local stories, local media. Nowadays, every time I'm back, when you look at local newspapers, most of the stories are sourced through BBC, Voice of America, which is a CIA outfit, if you didn't know, BBC, CNN, Voice of America, and sometimes, and Reuters, right? And all of these are controlled by and they're white supremacists because of how they present stories. And so when you read about Haiti, when you read about African countries, when you read about non-white communities, you always have to think about the lens through which these populations are being read. And that lens is a white supremacist lens. The way they're written about, the way they're portrayed, the images that are used, that are allowed to be used. I don't know, people don't realize, we don't see images of dead white people, but we see images of Palestinians every day. We see images of Africans. We see images of, dead babies, African, Black, African and Black Palestinians. How many times do you see images of dead white people for mainstream media? All of that, I think, has to do with thinking about how we think about white supremacy, who controls the world still. And all of us will be better off when we defeat white supremacy in a second revolution. And I think people need to look to Haiti, because what we met, one of the things that people don't think that diminishing the Haitian Revolution does, it doesn't allow us to see the message that was coming out of the Haitian Revolution, and the message was about humanity. Who's human? To be Haitian is to be human, is to be Haitian is to be black. To be black is to be human, and this is not about necessarily biological race, but it's about understanding that nationhood meant full emancipation, meant to be into accepting blackness as something that has everything to do with freedom. And I think if we don't understand, if we don't, if we understand the Haitian Revolution like that, blackness means freedom and humanity, then we can actually find a way to begin fighting white supremacy in the way that has completely taken over our education systems. I was in Ghana, and some of the school books all still say that, they still have a section on the benefits of colonialism. Like, how is it that we expect to be emancipated and free if we allow our colonizers and our oppressors to train our children? If we allow them to have a say in what books they learn, what books they learn from, what histories are told. We're not going to get out of this if we don't stop allowing Western structures to influence and impact the way that individual nations and people learn about themselves. The reason Haiti continues to suffer the reprisals of white supremacist colonialism and imperialism is because they keep fighting. They're not going down. They're not going down easy, right? If you look around us, the countries around us, how they've completely fallen into, they're all like neoliberal states that depend only on tourism. The story is in Jamaica no longer have full access to their beaches because the entire island is surrounded by foreign resorts, right? And so, I think if Haiti was not constantly fighting, it would be like these places that have been completely taken over. And I think part of it's like the resilience of Haitian people is that no matter what happens, people fight back. And I don't think, I think they're trying a different tactic now. We can talk about that later. And I think if we don't open our eyes, they might succeed. But it is important to know that this has been a Black pride. Haitians are proud of their history. They've never not been proud of their history. So if anybody tells you that, Haitian people will tell you that we fought the revolution that defeated Napoleon's army. We are proud Black people. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a section of society that hasn't internalized some of the racism, right? So, for example, we still have colorism that we have, in other places throughout the African world. We have an elite that is non-Black. And it's fascinating that they've remained non-Black, considering 98% of the population is like dark and like me. But then you have the tiny elite for 200 years that have managed to keep itself light and white. That tells you a lot. We have the oligarchy that's that. But at the same time, in our Constitution, I want to go back to that 1805 Constitution, where it says that no white man shall come back on our land as owner. And it said that in the Constitution, and like landowners. But the first thing the U.S. did when the U.S. invaded Haiti and occupied Haiti from 1950 to 1935 was rewrite the Constitution. So when people think that imperialism is like this bumbling idiot, they are very specific and targeted. We cannot underestimate how conniving and how long white people can hold grudges. And I think there's a grudge that the Europeans have against Haiti, because the first thing they did for them to go in and change the Constitution tells you that they've been thinking about it for a very long time. And if you read the words of the French Foreign Ministry all through times down to the 2004 coup d'etat, where they removed Haiti's president, you can tell the French in particular has a grudge against Haiti. They were mad that the president, for example, wanted reparations back for the indemnity, where they took all that money back from Haitians. And so I want us to think about the pride of Haitian people, because it is the pride of Haitian people in its history, in its blackness, that actually has had it fight over and over again. And that imperialism had to try different tactics over time to bring down the people. And so they're still trying different tactics now. And that's what we have to remember with that. But, the pride will continue. And the thing is, I hope the rest of the world sees that, because one of the saddest things for me is that I don't think people on the African continent know Haiti's history. If they did know it, this thing that Kenya is doing would be, the Kenyan government would be trashed. I mean, people would be out in the street protesting Kenyan government for doing the bidding of the white imperialists against this proud nation. So it saddens me that the rest of the world don't know, the rest of the black world. Forget, for at this moment I'm talking to our global black populations. They don't know Haiti's history, or they don't know anything past there was a revolution, and that's that. They don't know what that revolution meant, in terms of like the message that the revolution sent. In addition to destroying white supremacy and the Europeans, it also meant a particular kind of freedom that I don't think black nations have had yet. And I think we need to look to Haiti. And I think if we don't look to Haiti, then we won't, if Haiti is not part of the move for global black emancipation, then you won't have global black emancipation. Well, I want to say one thing. Haiti did ask for membership in the AU, and the AU denied it membership. And so I want people to know that Haiti asked. I think Haiti got observer status, but this was after the Israelis got observer status. I just wanted people to know that as well. I think, one of the things of AU has been disappointing to me, and I'm going to be honest, in the sense that AU has worked as a neocolonial agent. AU has stayed quiet over as the US and the Europeans and NATO militarized the African continent, bringing AFRICOM, by taking over, by supporting certain coups and dismissing other coups, and so on. And so I do think, one of the things that we actually need a different organization than the AU. I don't think the AU serves the African continent in the way that we wanted to serve. Because what you don't want is an institution that does not work for the people, but an institution that does the bidding of the West. And I think AU is filled with that. And if we either have to the structure of the AU and change the people going into AU, where we actually have Pan-Africanist people who understand that what Africa is serving right now, again, is to be a place where the West gets resources and controls everything. If we don't change the leadership or the membership of the AU, or the Africans who actually who understand, if we don't change that to Africans who understand African history, who understand what decolonization means, then what we need is actually a completely different organization that actually might be based more on the OAU that started in a particular way and then was dismantled. And so what I think what saddens me is the complete capture of African politics, like elect by the West, and that was easily done, because once you kill the radical leaders, what you end up with are neocolonial stooges that does your bidding. And so, and in the meantime, you have under Barack Obama the emergence of AFRICOM, the AFRICOM man that went from zero country, basis to Africa is in 34 countries on the African continent. So this is why you have an African Institute, AU. How did you allow the US military command to take over and militarize the African continent? And so for me, I would tell our people, the people on the ground on the African continent, to actually challenge the AU, because once we challenge that structure and find the right people who are for decolonization, who are anti-Western intervention, then you can actually have a conversation about having Haiti be part of it. Because I think Haiti is part of the global Black African diaspora. How do you not have Haiti in the AU? Remember, Haiti has been independent for a long time. Haiti was, even while it was under occupation, I don't know if people know this, was one of the founders of the League of Nations. right? And so we have to, it's been around for a long time thinking about that, right? And so Haiti's been around for a long time. Haiti has been part of the global African movement. And I think what we need is a major revolution that changes these structures, that are so that they're not so beholden to European funding. Because the other thing is, who funds the AU? Where's that money coming from? It's not just coming from African states. It's funded by partly the European Union, by the US, by all of these things. And so if whoever's funding a model and it says it's the African Union, it's not the African Union. Who funds the EU? It's not African states. And so if whoever's funding you determines whether or not you can have a say, it's something else, right? There's something to be said about that. And so to me, the AU has been shameful when it comes to Haiti, when it comes to other African situations. They flew to Russia to try to have a peace plan for the Ukraine situation, but they're sitting here letting the US send a country that is 12,000 miles away to invade another country over a gay problem, as opposed to what else is going on the African continent. So I don't have a message for AU except that we need a new structure. Yeah, the narratives are important because the narratives around Haiti have been ongoing for since the revolution. So if you look at European newspapers in the late early 1800s, late 1700s, presenting Haitians as savages. These people are killing raping white women, beheading the French, killing white people and eating them, and all of these things, which is fascinating because one of the things we have to remember that slavery in the Caribbean, and in Haiti in particular, was one of the most brutal. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about, like, look at what, I keep going to Palestine, but I see these images of babies with their heads blown out, gunshots and all that stuff. And look at the brutality of Europeans. Look how evil and depraved they are. And then you have to go. Then you have to start by saying, like, by what standards? I think Walter Rodney. By what standards of morality can you actually compare the violence of the colonized with the primary violence of the colonizer, right? So there's that. But the image, if we look at his image of those who are fighting against imperialism, against European empire, European violence and depravity, has always been they're the ones that are constructed as terrorists, right? The actual terrorists get to write the narratives, right? And so part of that is the image of Haiti has always been about who gets to write about Haiti. So if you look at all the newspapers in the early 1800s, it was all about, like, these Africans, these savages, doing all these things to white people, right? And then, in these same newspapers have nothing to say about the violence of slavery, where the average lifespan of African in Haiti was 7 years. 7 years from when they landed to when they died. In fact, it was cheaper for the slave traders to keep importing Africans than to actually give them the perfect, a life, a perfect life, but a life that had them live longer. So that's how brutal enslavement was, techniques used and so on. But the images are, we're the ones that are brutal. We're the ones that are, so that, they build a barbecue as like he's the devil incarnate. I'm like, you cannot compare barbecue to King Leopold. You cannot compare barbecue to the US, George W. Bush, Obama, the drum bombings, how many millions of people has the American government killed since 2000, for example, right? In Afghanistan, in Syria, in Iraq, in Haiti. So you have this image, this narrative that's constructed of Haiti as always already these brutal savages, the Africans in the New World, right? The worst, the heart of Africa. And in the New York Times, if you look at the New York Times from the early 1900s, especially during the occupation of Haiti, there are all these articles. There's an article that's imprinted in my mind. The title is "Haitians Eat a US Marine." right? So, and you're thinking like, what the hell? Like, it's just, but it is, it's like, and then some of these articles, some of the sayings is like, well, it's like Haitians tell us that, it's almost like being in the heart of Africa, the savagery of Africa. And it tells us that these people are not ready for modernity. They're not ready for civilization. So that's a narrative that's just constructed. And that's what Africans need to remember. These are the same narratives that are constructed for Africans, even these today, right? If we think about the way that, what was that disease, that epidemic that came out of it wasn't the Ebola. The Ebola narrative in what it's just recently, 2013, 2014, the newspapers here in the US, the magazines had pictures of monkeys, not Africans, monkeys, right? Because and then remember HIV, remember how Africans were represented? And the narrative was that Africans were having sex with chimpanzees or monkeys, which is how HIV was spread. So I want Africans to read newspapers in the West and see how Africans are represented to the West as savages, as people who are not ready for civilization. There's a quote. There's a recently released papers, I think a couple years ago, where Ronald Reagan was talking to his chief of staff during, I think, an independence event, watching an independence ceremony of African leaders, and he's just like, and he's laughing, and these are private conversations. He's like, look at these people, they're like monkeys, right? He's like, they look like they just learned how to wear shoes, right? And so if you read some of what they're saying about Africans, and then you think about these narratives, and then you read the narratives about Haiti, how do you reconcile the fact that what they're saying is true about Haiti, but you know what they're saying about Africa is racist and wrong? So the construction of the narrative of Haiti and Haitians as, an out of control country, these people who are like, still live like they're in the heart of Africa, because the narrative has everything to do with the way that they think about Africa. We are the Africans of the Caribbean, right? And so that's important for us to see. And so that narrative of Haiti as always being a basket case, it's been repeated for 200 years. And so it's easy for people to believe it, including people who are on the islands right next to us, right? I mean, because some of the bad treatment of Haiti, some of the worst treatments of Haitians come from other states like the Bahamas, like Barbados, like Jamaica, when they have Haitian migrants that come through, because they've already bought into the belief of Haiti and Haitians as being like the worst of the savagery of the world. But it's also how the white West constructs narrative, right? Because the brutality of the West is never constructed as brutality. So even as we watch Israel drop bombs, we don't savage, right? Even as, you have drone bombing and so on, dropping bombs, George W. Bush dropping bombs, the killing of 1 million Iraqis, how many Somalis, right? That's not seen as savage, right? How is that not seen as savage? Because they can control the narratives. They control how things are written, what bodies are seen as dead, who's corrupt, who's vicious. And so it's incredible to me. But if we don't understand that that's how images are constructed, then we don't understand how easy it is then to get everybody to jump on the bandwagon when it's time to say Haiti needs a foreign military intervention. One of the things we have to realize, the imperialism has imperialism is not just one thing. It has an arsenal of tactics to use, right? And one of the things, the only way imperialism is if it has help. And so it deploys, in Haiti, imperialism is being deployed through the Caribbean countries, through the neocolonial Caribbean countries, who themselves are suffering through imperialism, but without recognizing it or don't want to realize it. The US empire is an empire because it controls most of the world. It controls it through ideological means, and it controls it through setting up governments in other places that are amenable to its needs. And so the Caribbean serves US empire in very clearly. The US, can control Guyana, can control Barbados, can control Haiti. It controls it through ideology. It controls it through the market. It controls it through supporting leaders that do the bidding of Western empire, that do the bidding of neoliberalism. And so it makes perfect sense then that you have places like Barbados with Mia Mottley, who everybody thinks is a progressive, who's not. Let's be clear, she's not a progressive. She's a neoliberal shill, a generational politician. And she's doing everything she needs because she's been promised the job of UN Security Council. And so she's going to be the colonial overseer. And that's what she did it for Haiti. You know, she went in these meetings when the U.S. and I do want to take some time to talk about what's happened to Haiti, why politically things happen like that. But on March 11th, when the U.S. can you imagine the U.S. calls a meeting to decide who's going to be Haiti's leadership? That alone should blow your mind, right? Like the fact that who the hell put the U.S. in charge of Haiti's politics, that he can call a meeting and then bring CARICOM, where the CARICOM charter says there's an issue of non-interference in Haitian politics. But here you have members of CARICOM, which are leaders like Irfan Ali, who's I think the prime minister, is it the president of Guyana? You have Mia Mottley. All these countries who are served by neocolonial government, then doing the bidding of the U.S. because the U.S. promised them, the U.S. and Canada, and there are articles about what it is that the U.S. and Canada promised these aid relief, funding, and so on and so forth. You know, they're all getting paid in order to push Haitian, to push the removal, the denial of Haitian sovereignty. And that's the way to do it. So the Caribbean has been terrible. So CARICOM is an organization that I think celebrated its, is it 50th anniversary? But for most of its time around, did not pay to be part of it. And I go to, you know, these people, these are new governments. A lot of them got independence. Some of them are still not fully independent publics. You know, the highest court for Jamaica is in England, right? So we have to think the queen is still, you know, or now the king is still the leader of some of these countries. And so these when CARICOM came together, they did not want to have anything to do with Haiti. They bought into this idea that these people were so weird. They were like the language problem. Their religion was different because they practiced voodoo. They saw them as savages. Let's be real. I mean, except for, you know, groups of radical organizations in their countries. So I'm not blaming the people as much as the leadership. They saw, and then there was one, you know, if you read the papers, there was one leader of CARICOM did not even want Haiti in there because they're like, well, we have to like find money and time to translate all our documents into Creole, right? Can you imagine, right? So Haiti did not become a member of CARICOM until 2002. Mind you, CARICOM's been around for a long time, since the 70s. And that began with 1996, where he had more of a progressive leader of CARICOM, which was P.J. Patterson, when he was the prime minister of Jamaica, and then became head of CARICOM. And he's the one that pushed for Haiti's membership. And so for Haiti to not be a member of CARICOM to early 2003 tells you everything you need to know. And then for these leaders then to come in. And people have to know, when they sat down in March to set up the presidential council that the U.S. had come up with to deal with Haiti, it was Mia Mottley that pushed. And the people that participated in this discussion, the so-called Haitian leaders that participated in the council, were handpicked by the U.S. And so you're sitting in a room handpicked by the U.S., and then the U.S. told them, and it was Mia Mottley that pushed, right, that you cannot sit on this council if you do not agree to a foreign military invasion. So in order to sit at a table, you agree to a foreign military invasion. And it is Mia Mottley that threatened these people, you know, with not being on the council if they didn't agree to this invasion. And so for me, I hold the CARICOM countries accountable for participating in U.S. imperialism in denying Haitian sovereignty. And their citizens and residents should be just as disgusted with their leaders for what they're doing as we are. And so that to me that's important. And so the regional stuff is also important for imperialism because the US has a new thing called the Global Fragilities Act, which is their new Monroe Doctrine. Global Fragility Act, which is their new Monroe Doctrine. And the way they, and Haiti has been a laboratory because they realized from the 2004 coup d'etat, they could use the international community to actually carry on US interests by sharing costs. So with the 2004 coup d'etat, the US, France, and Canada removed the presidency, was able to get the UN to consecrate that coup d'etat and made it seem like it's not a coup d'etat and bring in so-called peacekeeping force that was paid for by the UN, that was done with members from most of the world countries. So the entire world was participating in the military occupation of Haiti. But, and in the WikiLeaks papers that were released, it said this was a foreign policy bargain. That's what they call it for the US, where you can get all these other people to participate in an occupation of a country in order to further US foreign policy goals. And so that's what the US is using these regions for. That's how they use AFRICOM, right? They come in, they use the Global Fragility Act brings together the State Department, the Department of Defense, and USAID. So you use NGOs, you use African military, and then you use regional partners that go in and do the dirty work, which is why the people set up to occupy Haiti now is Kenya. And Kenya was promised, $600 million, a state dinner, which is so disgusting, which happened in May, where, if we see these pictures of Ruto acting like a little boy sitting on Biden's chair, which is ridiculous. They became a non-major NATO ally, and then they're getting a military base as if that's a good thing, right? And so people are paid for that. And so the same way, so Kenya can be used as a proxy, but then there are also soldiers coming in from Jamaica, from Barbados. Mind you, I have to just say on this night, Jamaica has been under a state of emergency for like more than 2 years because of its gang violence, right? But nobody's sending military, but they have the nerve to say we're going to send military, police and military to Haiti. So the regional partners, what we have to go back to your question, I know I deviated a lot, but what the point is about when we talk about regional partners, we cannot talk about that without talking about the way that US imperialism works. The regional partners are part of the US imperial apparatus to further US foreign policy interests. They're being used the same way Kenya is being used, the same way that what's his name in Ghana is like the big puppet for the US and the West, Akufo-Addo, right? And they're all being used, and they're all part of the machinery of US imperialism. And so we have to understand that the way for us to be free is to get rid of US imperialism, but to get rid of these leaders that actually actively participate in the US imperial machine. Because the West talking a narrative, right? The poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, right? Every single story that you hear about Haiti in the newspaper has that that line, right? So, and people's like, oh, you're lying. The U.S. doesn't care about Haiti and Haitians. Like, that has nothing to do with anything. You guys are just a bunch of corrupt people, and you guys need to be managed and so on. So people always dismiss Haiti, but just clear geopolitically, the U.S. needs Haiti. The U.S. has needed Haiti for a long time, which is why they sent Frederick Douglass to negotiate for Mole St. Nicolas, that area. And if you look on the map and if you look at the Caribbean map, look at Mole St. Nicolas, it's very close to Cuba, where the Guantanamo Bay is. And so Haiti's in the Windward Passage. It's so easy for the U.S. boats to get through there, go through the Panama Canal, and get to Asia. In preparation for war with China, the U.S. needs this area, which is why I think this base military, the fact that Kenya is sitting there, they're using Kenya as a way to actually make sure that we have a permanent military base in Haiti, because they need that. So they need Haiti because they're preparing for war with China. We have to remember this. So they need to be able to do that. But also preparing for war with China would mean that losing access to cheap labor that Asia has produced. Haiti is one of the most populous countries in the area with 12, 13 million people. One of the other things is that people have been trying to get land, right? So, Haiti is one of the few places where people still own their land, right? Or the government owns land and people sit on it, and people pay a tax to the government, but it's not public land. So they've been trying to also change the constitution to allow people to own larger tracts of land in order to have these sweatshops that they want to set because they want the cheap labor. They will also want to remove people from working their lands because Haiti is still primarily agricultural. They want to remove people from working their land and create this labor force, take the land and then create this labor force thing in order to work at these factories because they're going to need it. And Haiti was a factory for Gildan T-shirts, Canada. For a long time, they were making Haitian baseballs, Hanes, and all these companies, right? So you need Haiti for that. The U.S. also needs to have a military presence in Haiti because they want to control what they see as the leftist governments that they cannot control. So they want to control Venezuela, Nicaragua, they want to control Cuba. They want to have that base there because they also want to stab off Chinese and Chinese and Russian influence, what they see as Chinese Western influence in the region. And so Haiti is significant for that because once you establish a military base, you can have that. You can go through with your as your aircraft carriers can go through from the eastern coast through there, go through the Panama Canal, and head to get blown up in the South China Seas. But it's a whole other conversation. So there's that. But there's also Haiti's minerals that we don't talk enough about. The $1 trillion worth of minerals, the iridium, the gold, the oil that Haiti has, and especially northern Haiti. And people, some family members are telling me that people, you can in their backyards they can like dig and find oil. And so I do think it's important. We have to know that the need for resources is there, the need for the geopolitics is there, and that's what's happening. And I wanted to just point to imperialism has the same tactics. It changes off and on. Like I do think one of the things is what's happening in Venezuela happened in Haiti in 2003 when Aristide won the elections, which is what led to the coup in 2004, right? But if people did not exceptionalize Haiti the way they did, they would go back and see what the U.S. was doing. What's happening to Nicolas Maduro in the so-called elections, and not so-called elections, but in the elections, it exactly what happened in Haiti in 2002. So, but people don't look at us as if we're like a laboratory, even when we are, right? Our country is. And so you can see that happening. And what they ended up doing was using the National Endowment for Democracy, which people don't know about, to actually fund the so-called opposition groups in Haiti, the student groups, because that's the new thing now. What it is taking all the radical movements, all the radical energy of the young people in Haiti and siphoning them into NGOs that the USAID funds. And so if you look at Haitian newspapers now that are said to be grassroots and local, look where their funding is coming from. Even the women's groups are being used, right? Are being funded by USAID and US NGOs to do a particular thing. So they use an amalgam of strategies, right? So you can use the OAS, which is the Organization of American States, which Fidel Castro called the Ministry of Colonies, which makes perfect sense. The OAS is being used in Venezuela, but the OAS changed Haiti's elections in 2010 when Hillary Clinton changed the election results, and the OAS ratified the changing of the election results. So these organizations are working for the U.S. What's happening in Venezuela happened in Haiti already. And so we have to remember that. So Haiti is very significant. It is significant also for the way that the Global Fragilities Act that the U.S. has just signed had already happened in Haiti. The model was Haiti for them to actually come up with that sign. So that way, that these days now, you don't have to do coup d'etats. You just have to use regional partners. You have to use NGOs to carry on what needs to be carried on. And so it doesn't look like you have to send your white soldiers in there to attack the way that they attacked during the Grenada Revolution when Reagan invaded Grenada and killed all these people. You don't need that. You can just bring in black soldiers to come and kill for you. And you can get these NGOs, from women's groups to youth groups that are being funded to carry on your ideological work. When the news say, revolution in Georgia, the country Georgia, It's because they were going against the NGOs, because the NGOs do a particular kind of work. And so we have to, like I was at a conference, and I asked the academics, I'm like, have you all heard of NED, the National Endowment for Democracy? No one had heard of the National Endowment for Democracy. So we need to actually do that work, because the National Endowment for Democracy funds so-called democracy groups, right? Whenever there's a protest in the third world, the global South, and the West saying pro-democracy protests, you must know that they're funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, because when Haitians have been protesting for all these years, from 2000, most recently 2016, 2017, 2018, they never called them pro-democracy protests. And that's how actually white people remain supreme, because the NGOs do the ideological work to make it seem like the West controls everything and the West is right. The West is the arbiter of democracy and human rights and so on and so forth, even as we're watching a live genocide aided and abated by these brutal, depraved Westerners, right? I've written about this when it comes to the African continent. The development apparatus is a racist, racializing, a white supremacist apparatus. And what's been disheartening for me as an academic who studies Africa as well is the language of everything. Like, especially, I'm an anthropologist, right? When you see anthropology works, and it's the assumption that the West is all good all the time, and that they taken for granted notions of what corruption is, what development is, and how everybody needs development, and how capacity building is something, so good governance, right? And so even when they're talking about the idea, so some of the key terms, good governance. So Africans need good governance. Which the implication is that Africans don't know how to govern themselves. So we need to actually teach them good governance. Oh, they need capacity. I hate the term capacity building, because they don't have the capacity, so we need to help them build capacity. There's another one. I wrote a paper and I focused on three of them. But part of that is based on this notion that the African lacks, and there's an African lack, and the lack of intelligence, lack of wherewithal to see themselves, to understand themselves. And so we need to come in and teach them these things. And so these terms have been taken up by the development apparatus, especially with academia, and they take it for granted. So they also take for granted that capitalism is the only solution to things, right? And so you can't even challenge the neoliberal model. And so it's funny because anthropologists made a fetish of talking about the neoliberal moment, but they don't actually study what you mean by neoliberalism, which depends on a particular ideological perspective of Western might and Western right? And so there's all of that. The development apparatus is holding us behind. But the thing is, the way they've worked it is that they were able to get Africans to buy into this. And so when you have Africans buy into NGOs, in order to get funding for the NGOs, you have to write a proposal. The proposal has to use the language. So if you don't use the right language, you're not going to get the funding. So they're already, disciplining you to accepting certain things. Only certain things get funded. And so after a while, you turn in one proposal, two proposals, because the funding is coming from Europe. And so if the Europeans say, well, we need to deal with African women and their fertility issues because they're having too many babies. So you need to figure out to write the proposal to not say, to be, well, the problem is the IMF subsidies that have been removed, or the fact that the IMF tells you that you can no longer have education programs. No, the problem is African women are having too many babies, and we need to stop them by giving them, condoms, so they can stop having babies, right? So then people buy into this and start writing these proposals to fit that. And African academics fall into play too, because this structure is set up that universities can't fund their own African universities, or they're paying the IMF, and the IMF tell them that they have to actually, the conditionality that you have to defund your universities. So you have like what we call these African scholars who go and get a fellowship in the West. And in order to get a fellowship in the West, you have to write a certain way. So the ideology, manufacturing of consent happens over and over again through these NGOs, through these funding agencies, the Ford, the Mellon, and all these agencies that fund particular kinds of work, then that manufacture consent, but also manufacture the way we think about the world, what we think the problems are. So then you have Africans writing about corruption by saying, well, once you find oil, Africans are going to suffer from resource curse. As if there's, and the resource curse narrative is something that's a big thing, because it basically says, if you're a country that has oil, then you're going to suffer from poverty and corruption and so on and so forth. And then, of course, certain countries like Norway, which has oil and has a huge sovereign fund from their oil, they're not seen as having a resource curse. It's mostly the countries in the global south that are seen as having resource curse. But the resource curse is not even about the fact that these corporations get to dig for oil and only pay these countries 3% to 5% of profits. You don't even know, when you have a company that's drilling out, drilling oil out in the sea, the countries don't even have access to the corporations' drill. They don't even know how much oil is being drilled out of the ground. And the company can just tell them, we drilled this amount. And then they only get the 3 to 5%. But you know what gets counted, what gets discussed? Is the corruption out the 3 and 5% that these African leaders get, not the 95, 96% of profits that are being generated by these corrupt corporations. That doesn't become part of the discussion. But then we have the NGOs to help us focus only on corruption, capacity building, good governance, right? We focus on that. And so we make it seem as if all the problems that happen to the African continent is internal, that it's because they're not smart. It has nothing to do with the outside world, with the white supremacist global structure that makes it so that corporations can get away with a contract that they only give, that they're taking your resources but giving you 3% of that, right? And so the NGOs are there to manufacture consent, to kill off any radicalism, and to bring these young people who are protesting, who are going against imperialism, as well as how imperialism impacts their domestic relations. They take them and they put them into NGOs, and then they start changing the language and changing the ideology. And so I don't think any country who wants to be free should have foreign NGOs. The other thing I want to say about NGOs is that it is a work program for white countries. Because what it does is it gives jobs to young people in the West, white people in the West who couldn't get jobs in their countries. Then they can come to the third world and act as kings and queens as they work as the NGO. So they have their drivers, their cars, they get free rent, they get extra pay, hazard pay, and all of that stuff. So these 20, 30-year-olds who just finished college, finished their MBAs, or not MBAs, or MAs in development studies, can come to Africa and work at an NGO, right? It's a jobs program for white people. In order to have revolution, we need to get rid of every single NGO. Look, if I were to run Haiti, the first thing I would do, I would I would get rid of the UN office that is occupying Haiti, but I would shut down every single NGO that works in that country. The first genocide of the 20th century happened to the Herero people in Namibia, where the German Second Reich, the Herero and Namakwa people, where the German Second Reich destroyed almost 90% of the population, waged war because they wanted an empire. And the Herero people fought back because they kept taking their land in Southwest Africa. The people fought back, and the brutality of the Germans there, what they did was they killed all these people. They drove them into the desert, poisoned all the wells around the desert, and killed the Herero and the Makwa people, 1908. We don't hear that genocide. This was a Holocaust. And then the few that survived, they sent them to concentration camps. And then later on, they turned them into servants. This is the history of the Herero people. This is white supremacy. This is what Europe does, right? What, I saw something recent is that the reason, you cannot compare, to think about the US is like what that Zionist terrorist entity is doing is what the US succeeded in doing, to the indigenous people, what the Australians succeeded in doing by killing millions of them, devastating their infrastructure, killing all their animals and so on. That's what's happening, right? And so we know about the Namakwa and Herero, the genocide against them by the Germans. Germans, up until very recently, refused to talk about it, right? But we hear about the Holocaust every time. Nobody says stop talking about this. This happened long ago, right? The Americans still talk about the American Revolution. Everybody talking about remember 9/11. So Europeans can have commemorations. We cannot. Europeans can talk about their history. We cannot. But the thing is, we are still living in the aftermath, in all the structures of the world that has been set up are direct results, our direct responses to our enslavement and our colonization, right? So you cannot not talk about the history of slavery when for example, the reason that France has one of the largest gold reserves in the world without one gold mine is because of its colonialism. You cannot talk about Belgium without talking about the Congo. Belgium is wealthy because it strips the Congo bare. It was cutting off hands and feet for rubber. It's Leopold was the worst. If African lives mattered, Leopold would be more reviled than Hitler because he killed millions more. Chopped fingers, chopped breasts of women if their husband was not getting enough rubber, right? So you cannot understand contemporary history without understanding the history of colonialism and slavery, because that's what the whole Walter Rodney book was about, how Europe underdeveloped Africa. European wealth, when you go to Paris, that hyper militarized space, and you see the Eiffel Tower, remember that was built with Haitian money. That's the money they stole from Haiti. Remember that the English was still paying the former enslavers reparations till 2015 from slavery. Remember that there's still people who own plantations in the Caribbean, generations in England. The wealthy were making money off of their plantations. When you go to the Caribbean, all these white people still own the Caribbean. The reason we have in places like Mozambique, where you go to places you have all white people, all white spaces. We have them in Mozambique. We have them in Ghana. You can go to a restaurant, a club, all white people. Who owns? The reason you have all these things is because of the history of colonialism. How is it this tiny little landmass that's not even a continent, but they call themselves a continent, is able to control 90%, 99% of the world? How is it? How is it that Europe with no resources that it can count up? It can still control the world, it has so much power. The only way to do that, is to understand the 500 years of murder and mayhem and theft of the rest of the world. Europe has no resources. Let me repeat that. Europe has no resources. The resources that they're enjoying come from us. They have none. And so we have to understand how it is that this tiny little backwater, that's not even a continent, we should call it West Asia, has all this wealth, controls so much. It didn't happen because they're smarter, because they're biologically superior. No, it happened because of theft and plunder. People are afraid to be angry, but look how angry white people get. Look how angry white people get when 9/11 happened. These Americans were like, we're going to kill the entire world for revenge. You have the Zionist terrorist entity is revenge. After occupying, stealing land from the Palestinians for 76 years, a tiny little attack that they could have prevented because they control that entire region, historic Palestine. But their anger, their vengeance is going on where you're killing almost 200,000 people and bombing and destroying the whole country. But they get away with it. And you're telling us Africans that after everything that's happened, the fact that I'm on the other side of the world is because of European transporting millions of us from the African continent, taking away all the young, strong people, and also taking us away. Now the brain drain, all of us are on this side of the world through this brain drain. When we could be helping our continent, our people, we're sitting here, providing more stuff and helping, the US, the West, and so on and so forth, because our places are no longer able, we can't survive there sometimes because of this long history. And I'm just like, there has to be something. We have to look at the education system. We have to look at our leadership, the failure of independence. I'm going to call it a failure of I'm going to call it flag independence because it was not real independence. And I think Africa really needs independence. The independence is not there. The people who are supposed to lead the independence were killed and deposed. Let's remember, most of the radical leaders on the African continent were killed and deposed. We're left with what's left over, which is about maintaining European power. So I think that until we reckon with what's been going on, with the fact that the plunder and misery, the millions dead, the Congo, the millions dead for the European war in what they call the First World War, the millions dead to save so-called Europe, right? In the Second World War, the millions dead in disease, death, and plunder right now I'm in Mozambique, but I still remember, I know the history of what they did in Lourenço Marques in forced labor that the Portuguese did with the Africans, the enslavement. And how do you turn around today, walk around and watch all these Portuguese running around and still owning all your property, right? And so there's something about the education has allowed Black people to assume that they're less than, to have low self-esteem, and to assume that white people are superior. You might not say it, but you see it. You see it in the deference. For me, no white person should actually walk freely on the African continent without permission after the 500 years of plunder and death that they've caused on the continent. And so until we have to actually be outraged by this history of plunder and death that has allowed us to live in poverty and to suffer death, to suffer the most. And while the people who perpetrated all of this are living in wealth and coming back to these places where they plundered and living like kings still, why are you not angry about that? There's no freedom without this anger, because you have to know there's a problem in order for you wanting to fix it. And you cannot fix the problem using the institutions created by your oppressors. Audre Lorde, the Black feminist, always has an essay called "The Uses of Anger," and I think people should read that, because I think it is important to think about anger can be an important emotion to have. And I'm angry at the inequality in the world. I'm angry that there are all these billionaires that own the majority of the wealth in the world, while I walk around and I see so much death and misery. But so much death and misery is non-white people. In a place where you have beauty and resources, in a place like in an African country where you have that is by Africans, but then you have a minority non-Africans still owning all the wealth, all the buildings, the beach houses and so on and so forth, for the most part, are owned by foreigners. And the vast majority of Africans are still impoverished. That, to me, we should be angry about that, because that is not right, because you don't see that in the West. In the West, you don't have a small Black foreign minority, even a small Black domestic owning the majority of the wealth and so on and so forth. We should walk around. I wish people had time to travel around the world to see how Black people live everywhere, and then to see the white people in their countries, even in Haiti. I write about this in Ghana. Like, there's a whole chapter I have in my first book, which is mostly about Ghana, but on like whiteness. Like, in a place that didn't have settler colonialism, how is it that white supremacy still reigns? How is it that whiteness still has privilege? Because of the structure of the world, because the economic structure of the world, but also because the ideological, and that has to do with religion, that has to do with class, that has to do with all of that. Yeah, there's a Haitian saying that is in Creole, is nous l'aide, nous là. We are ugly, but we are here. And ugly is not necessarily like, but it's just things may be ugly, but we're still here. So nous l'aide, nous là, right? And I think that's an important way to think about it. It's just, they have tried everything on us. And right now, I think they think they're winning, right? Because they've set up, they put together a whole presidential council. They set up Haitian, so they destroyed the Haitian state. And then they bring in their own people to try and do it again. But I think there's something special about Haiti, about the history. And I think there's something that people do where they underestimate the power and resilience of Haitian people. One of the things that's important is that Haitians do see the work of the US as an imperialist work, not the ones that you see on TV that are, following whatever dictate the US tells them. But I think people know what's going on. We understand. Nous l'aide, nous là says a lot about where we are. And I think I hope, we didn't get to talk about how Haiti got to where it is now, but it is important. I hope people in Kenya, in the region, understand that what's happening in Haiti right now is a colonial project that's been ongoing, and that Haiti is under occupation. It's been under occupation since 2004, when the US, France, and Canada took our president, put him on a plane, and flew him to Africa. Right. And this is an occupation that is continuing, that Kenya is participating in. But when we remove these foreigners, the Kenyan officers that are there are part of this occupation force that are going to have to be purged to get out of our country. And one of the things that Haitians remember, and Haitians are resilient. I hate the word too, but I think it's important to know that, because look, we've lasted this long. It's been 230 years of a counter revolution, the most successful counter revolution against the country. And despite the fact that the counter revolution has been successful, the people still continue to speak and to go against it. There's still a voice against it. And that, to me, is a message that the rest of the world should see. And that's why the rest of the world should support Haiti against US imperialism, against Western imperialism. I wrote this essay called "The Leftism of the Americas Crumbles at the Door of Haitian Sovereignty." So part of that is, there is something, except for the Black Alliance for Peace, and I have to say, of which I'm a member. It's one of the few organizations that talk about Haiti always. I mean, we have a team that's called the Haiti Americas team, because Haiti, we think, is the center of the region, right? But most people don't talk about it. That's the same way that they don't link the Haitian Revolution to the Cuban Revolution or the Chinese Revolution. Which happened before, right? So you have the Chinese Cuban, you have the Haitian Revolution, and then you have the Chinese Cuban much later, even earlier than the Russian Revolution, right? It's fascinating to me, and this is how the regionalism, and this is racism as well, because during the 2004 occupation, when the US used the UN to send troops to consecrate the coup d'etat, what ended up happening is that it was Brazil under Lula Ignacio da Silva, who's a leftist president, so-called, who offered to lead the intervention with his military, where the Brazilian government spent almost $1 billion in the 14 years that its military was occupying Haiti under Lula, but through different organizations. And so Lula has never apologized to what's happened to Haiti. And Lula supports this current intervention. In fact, when the US wanted to do another intervention, it asked Lula first. And I think because it was, so many people in Brazil were against that, he said no. And then there's Mexico. Everybody says, AMLO, Manuel López Obrador, that he's so great because he's standing up for Venezuela. Nobody stands up for Haiti. I mean, the same thing happened. Nobody said anything. In fact, Mexico worked with the US to write the resolution to send this latest military force to Haiti. This is Mexico, where the gang cartels control swaths of the land. But they're writing a resolution to send our military invasion in Haiti. So I think this has everything to do with racism. I think these leaders are very racist. I think there are only 3 countries in the region that have stood for Haiti, some more boldly than others. Venezuela, under Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro. In fact, Nicolas Maduro is one of the few people who was against this foreign military intervention. Haiti. There's Cuba, who's always been very helpful in Haiti and who still trains doctors, who still has doctors in Haiti. And then there's Nicaragua, who's also under siege by the US, right? But the region, there's something to be said about the fact that the region holds the same racist views about Haitians, that when it gets mad about what's happening in Venezuela, it's not saying anything about this force. They have not said anything about the fact that what's happening in Haiti is illegal and unconstitutional and is unwarranted. So all these people who are criticizing what's happening to Venezuela, they're not saying anything about Haiti. And that to me is the saddest part if we want to talk about the left and the racism of the left. Yeah, I was looking for it, and I can't. It's a quote by Walter Rodney, and it says, what is it? By what I think I found a little bit of it. So we were told that violence in itself is evil, and that whatever the cause, it is unjustified. But by what standards of morality can the violence used by a slave to break his chains be considered the same as the violence of a slave master? By what standards can we equate the violence of the Blacks who have been oppressed, suppressed, depressed, and repressed for 4 centuries with the violence of the white fascists? Violence aimed at the recovery of human dignity and at equality cannot be judged by the same yardstick as violence aimed at the maintenance of discrimination and oppression. That's my favorite quote from Walter Rodney, and it's in Grounded with My Brothers. And I do think it's important for us to know, because there's something to be said about the fact that we assume that we always have to, our tactics always have to be like negotiations and so on and so forth. But sometimes our oppressors don't have the moral basis for any negotiation. You cannot negotiate with with someone with no morality. And so we always have to remember this, and we always have to make sure we have useful anger at our oppressors. Imperialism. I think, and in US imperialism in particular, because these days people are easy to say, well, Chinese imperialism and so on and so forth. But it's fascinating to me. I think what happened with so-called independence, what I would call flag independence, is that people stopped talking about imperialism as white supremacy. Because I think that's important too. People don't want to talk about white supremacy. They don't want to talk about race because they think everything ended with independence. But colonization was only one aspect of imperialism. So imperialism started a while ago. You can end colonization and not have ended imperialism. And so what's not talked about is the still powerful US imperialism and how it shifted over the years. And now it's more about militarization of the US, but it's also it's an economic imperialism. And now that economic imperialism is losing out, it's militarizing regions. The US has 7 commands. It has the Southern Command, the Northern Command, the African Command. It has all these, it's carved up the world in military regions because imperialism needs the militarized as it's losing out and economically, it needs a militarizing. And so it's trying to hold its power. And so I think we need to actually understand that imperialism still works, that it's still around, that it works, that it's part of the white supremacist project, that it's about race and white rule. And that we need to figure out, okay, if it's still around, if it's still working, how is it working? Because until we deal with US imperialism, control of the world, control of everything, we cannot be free. Because you have to be able to diagnose a problem, and people don't diagnose. People are still talking about tribalism, like internal dynamics of countries, and not the foreign structures that actually shape how so-called tribalism happen. So imperialism is the word. I'm remembering Nkrumah's famous phrase, dictum, seek ye first the political kingdom and all else will follow. And I'm like, Nkrumah was wrong, sorry, brother, but I think what it needs to do is the freedom, economic freedom, controlling your resources. And so one of the key things I think, if I were to go back, is to say not just settle for flag independence. And one of the things is redistribution of land, the taking over of land and resources. Because what I see in South Africa is disheartening. The fact that the land was never redistributed, the fact in Zimbabwe partly, but not really, but taking over access to all resources, removing all foreigners in positions, removing all foreigners, all the white colonists who were there, who own races, reclaiming all property, government property, and taking control of economics. But also removing these people from these positions. And I think that's the only way you can get freedom, or else, you'll be part of a counter revolution until they take over again, or they maintain it, right?